From 120 under 40, the new generation of family planning leaders, it's Candid Conversations. Real people, real stories, real impact. A podcast where we talk to family planning and reproductive health champions from around the globe and take a deep dive into current topics in family planning and reproductive health, as well as the personal journeys of our champions, the challenges they faced, what excites them about the future, and some advice for other up-and-coming leaders. I'm Carolina Samaran. Welcome back for episode 6 of Candid Conversations. As you all know, this is Carolina. I hope you all have had an excellent start to 2021. I know that we've all been through a rough patch with 2020 and everybody is doing the best they can. So congratulations for making it to 2021. Today we have a very special guest, June Low from Malaysia, to talk to us about her vision for sex ed. June, welcome. Please Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello. My name is June Low. I'm from Malaysia. I'm a sex educator, and I'm currently based at Kyoto University in Japan. I'm very glad to be here, Carolina. Thanks for inviting me.
Of course, welcome. It's always exciting to have a new person on the podcast. So June, you were a recent winner of the 120 under 40. Welcome to the cohort. What are your feelings about it?
Oh, it's been really amazing. The recognition has really helped to put a lot of the work that I'm doing out in the spotlight. So people have started to take notice of it. I think that with these sorts of things, it's not that, the people making these things or making these advocacy efforts want to be famous or anything, but it's just most of the time they're easy to ignore and people don't take them as seriously. So this backing is really what's needed to get our work out there. So it was an excellent project and I'm really grateful for the recognition.
Awesome. And we're grateful to have you on board. You have a lot of experience, particularly in the comprehensive sexual education side of things. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your work in that and what have you been up to?
Now, I started teaching sex ed on oil palm plantations in Malaysia. It was a CSR project by one of these oil palm companies. And then when the CSR budget for that sort of ended, I decided to branch out on my own because I enjoyed it so much. And I really saw the impact that it had on young people. So I started designing my own programs. And after a while, I realized, this is early in the game where I realized, hey, no one's taking notice and no one wants to talk to you if you're doing comprehensive sex education in an abstinence-based world. And of course, you have, your social cultural issues going against you as well. I was just sort of, playing around with what I was doing. And I was like, people making YouTube videos. I'll make a YouTube video. I'll make a YouTube thing. And I like making videos. I like writing. So I put out this sex ed show, and suddenly the media were calling it Malaysia's first comprehensive sex ed show. And that's certainly not what we set out to do, right? We just wanted to make a sex ed show. And then we realized, oh my God, no one else is doing something like this. Everyone else is kind of like, pussyfooting around the issues. No one else is,
Mm-hmm.
Saying that, hey, masturbation isn't going to make you blind and playing a Stevie Wonder track in the background as a joke. Like no one was making that sort of direct attempt at talking about sex. And not in a way that, um, I don't like to make people feel uncomfortable when they watch my stuff. That's not my objective. I like to make them feel welcome when they watch my stuff. I think a lot of people take the position that if they're uncomfortable, then they're listening. I don't think that's true. Yeah. So then, after years of teaching and putting out programs and advocacy and putting out content, I got a scholarship to come and do my master's in Japan. Um, and that's where I'm at right now. And I've just finished writing up my research. And my research is quite interesting, actually. So everybody's been studying why don't we have sex ed in Malaysia? Do people need sex ed in Malaysia? We need comprehensive sex ed in Malaysia because these bad things are happening to our children. And children are lost because they have no sex ed. But no one's actually looked at what kind of sex ed do we need in Malaysia? Like, what topics exactly should we put into our sex ed curriculum? And of
Hmm.
course, as with any research, it doesn't apply to everybody in the world. But what's interesting is that my findings are in line with international findings and reviews. So people have conducted this sorts of research in other countries and found that this is what young people want to learn about, and so it's quite interesting. So hopefully, people will take notice, and I hope to share the results of it instead of having it buried in the annals of internal medicine or something. And yeah, just put my interest is in communication, and science communication is one of them. So I'd like to put out more information or create more opportunities for people to engage. And I think I'm at the moment planning some webinars for people to join and talk to me about what I've learned as well, so we can build on that together. And of course, with the 120 under 40, I'm also an Ingenuity Fund winner for 2020. And they've been very
Hmm.
generous in funding my little idea, which was to work with artists to come up with new ways to present sex education. The response has been very encouraging. We've had an increasing amount of viewers to the social media channels. And people are going like, oh, this is cool. Oh, that's cool. And we're learning. What's important is that we're learning about the way that they engage with the content as well. For example, you expect, like, okay, something Kylie Jenner posts, right, we get like 1 million likes or whatever. Something sex ed, people kind of don't want to be seen to be engaging with posts like that. And so we get a lot of,
Really?
yeah, we get a lot of private messages like, oh, this is cool. But like, why aren't these people saying it's cool? And we're like, can you write this is cool as a comment? So we look like so we look like it's engaging. But people don't want to be seen to be doing that. So I think it's sex ed content, measuring impact of sex ed content is it's a whole new world. It's totally different.
That is very interesting that you mentioned that. And first of all, I want to applaud you for taking on the beast that is comprehensive sexual education. But maybe for those that don't know what that means, can you break down what makes it comprehensive? What different elements are generally covered in comprehensive sexual education?
Okay, so in Malaysia, for example, they take an abstinence approach to sex ed, which quite simply is don't have sex, just don't have sex. And so if you don't have sex, you don't need to know about contraception. You don't need to know about options. You don't need to know about abortion. You'll be safe forever. But when you get married, everything will fall into place, trust me. But it doesn't. um, and in comprehensive sex education, it's about equipping young people with like a whole range of comprehensive skills, communication skills, talking to a partner, learning about contraception and anatomy. That's just one part of it, and that's the biology, which a lot of people would happily cover if they did cover. But what is more difficult is talking about things like understanding gender and its impact on inequality in relationships and communication, and teaching young people from a very young age to dismiss inequality and stereotyping in their lives. That's a very comprehensive curriculum, um, which I'm very proud to be able to teach.
Hmm.
And from experience, it is not impossible to teach this. And I see it every day that my young students are just rejecting any notion of inequality, and it's wonderful. So comprehensive sex education, the definition depends on who you ask, right? But most people agree that it's about upholding people's rights to information and people's rights to be safe and people's rights to have a choice in their relationships and their love lives, and to choose what they want that's in line with their own sexuality. And in line with information, it's sort of um, people getting the chance to really explore who they are, because that's their right to do that. So that's the
Right.
difference. Big difference between just saying, just don't have sex. Thanks. That's the end of sex ed for today. Go home.
Right. I mean, we've known for a very long time that abstinence approach doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And So I guess my next question for you is how do you respond to the people that don't particularly agree with your approach, that don't agree with teaching young people about, sexual education early on? What is the proper way to address those issues?
In I think in the early days, papers were still writing things like this the taboo subject of sex education, da 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 da. But I think you see a change with advocacy. You see a change with you know, for want of a better word, when shit hits the fan, people start to take notice, right? And has hit the fan, and it's a mess. So people cannot ignore sex education as a solution, okay? And so people
Hmm.
start to listen, and I think that a lot of people are still of the opinion that sex education teaches young people how to have sex, okay? And I think that international guidelines like the UNESCO guidelines, they're mindful of that too. As a politically negotiated document, um, that as part of my research, I examined the UNESCO guidelines against the needs of Malaysians, and I found that there's no express mention of sexual behaviors, sexual activities, right? So things like anal sex, sex on my period, sex on the rooftop is, funnily enough, not included in these UNESCO guidelines.
I
Um,
wonder why.
mm, yeah, so no mention of sexual behavior because it's assumed that if you put it into guidelines or curriculum, then you're teaching young people how to have sex. But I think that when you're faced with that sort of, I want to say opposition, but it's also ignorance, then it's your job to sort of engage with people and talk to them and explain or show them, show, don't tell, right? That's what they always tell us
Hmm.
in sex ed. So people are often shocked, parents. So when I teach, I make sure that there's communication, active communication between teacher and parents and schools if they're involved, right? If this is not private class. Um,
Hmm.
so you have to explain. So you have to be very transparent. So people go like, why are you going to teach this? What are you going to teach? Blah, blah, blah. And I've often found that if you're transparent and you explain clearly, not in a sort of holier than thou way, not in a sort of like, you should know this, blah, blah sort of way, then people do listen. And the media has a huge role to play. There are a couple of people that have a huge role to play, not just people that come up with these programs. People like um, the Gates Institute, the Johns Hopkins, right? They're doing a great job supporting people like me. And then people go, oh, hey, if Gates can get behind that, maybe I should pay attention, you know?
Hmm.
Um, the UN agencies, they've, brought together sex educators and digital content creators from around Asia Pacific. And we were talking about the issue of censorship and how these agencies can provide more support to us. So basically these dialogues and these open forms of support for people doing this work, it helps. The media starts to take notice, and when the media starts to run stories about it, then people start to take notice. So for example, as a result of this 120 under 40 win, the media started to run stories about that, and people went like, oh, here's a Malaysian doing us proud. Here's a
Hmm.
Malaysian doing good stuff for our children. So let's look at what she's doing. And the thing is, I invite people to look at what I'm doing and tell me what they think as well, so that I can do better. Not just look at me as some kind of, sex ed goddess. That's pretty cool. That's pretty
That does
cool.
sound amazing.
Yeah, that's not the point of this. It's sort of looking at it. If someone says, "Hey, maybe you can improve on this," then we can all do better. I'd love a world where people are informed. And now I see people going like, "Hey, you haven't covered this. You haven't covered that. Can you
Oh,
cover
that's
this?"
excellent.
Yeah, it's wonderful. So in that's a very long response to your question of how do we overcome people who don't get it or want that, but the truth is it's a long process to deal with that, and there's many 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 things that have to be done. I myself have been working at this for 10 years to get to a point where people are like, oh, cool. This is nice,
Yeah.
so
Right. And I think this topic of talking to people that disagree or have differing views is really quite important, particularly now that everything is digital and virtual. We have all this misinformation, and so we really have to be very tactful and how we
Hmm.
approach these issues and talk to people in a way that doesn't alienate them. And I think it's excellent. I think what you're doing is amazing. And so now I'm a little curious about your topics that you cover. I know that you said people have suggested things. Maybe you can tell us about what are the most popular things that people want to learn about.
Hmm. People want to learn about sexual positions, how to increase how to increase pleasure. Funnily enough, people want to know how they can have better sex. What a surprise.
What a surprise.
Yeah, people who, and you know what's interesting is from my research, I see people that they go. I'm researching these anonymous online discussion forums, you know, where people talk about sex. I'm looking at these conversations, and from the conversations, we kind of get insight into what they're thinking about, what they're concerned about, right? So, what people most want to learn about is really, like I said, I've waited thus long to get married and be able to bonk in a halal way. And now it hurts, or my husband cannot maintain an erection, or my wife is not interested in having sex with me because she says it hurts all the time. And
Hmm.
people don't know things about lubrication, people don't know things about the body, you know. There are many stories about like people trying to get pregnant by not putting by putting the penis in the wrong hole, so they don't know what's going on there.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and it's hilarious. There was one story, I remember this so well. This guy was saying, my wife and I have been trying to get pregnant for ages. I saw it in this like nonsense newspaper. And I don't know why we have sex every day, you know, but we she's still not pregnant. So sperm is produced in the testicles. So I've been putting my testicles into her for like the
Oh my
longest
goodness.
time. Yeah, true story. And she's still not pregnant. So why? I'm doing this wrong.
Wow.
Yeah, so there's an amazing amount of ignorance. But but like I said, people want to learn about how to have more pleasurable sex, and people are talking now about like how they're having lots of sex and they don't want to get pregnant and they don't know how to prevent pregnancy. People are talking about
Mhm.
um, dysfunction. You know, there's a high prevalence of dysfunction, sexual dysfunction in Malaysia, which is not talked about, and it's very important to talk about that. So if you want to talk about things like sexual pleasure, sexual dysfunction, you have to talk about sex. You have to talk about the act of sex, right? And that's what
Mhm.
people are uncomfortable talking about. And you know, I teach kids as young as 8, right? And when I talk about sexual acts, sexual behavior, they do not even flinch. You know, they're just like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, yeah. So, you know, when we talk about this, they're like, yeah, yeah,
Interesting.
yeah. Yeah, they're so cool because they, when you talk to them about how this is a very normal part of life, they have no issues with it. And guess what? They're not rushing out to have sex either, you know, because we've talked about responsibility in sex as well and the beauty of growing and learning, you know. So it's, I don't know.
That's a very interesting situation. I mean, having to teach 8-year-olds. I mean,
Mm,
what do you? Yeah, and I follow you on Instagram, and it is
sorry,
super.
I
No,
apologize.
no, it's wonderful. I love it. I think it's really great all the work that you do, and I've noticed you posted some videos of you teaching some young kids. I
Yeah,
think one of them is your nephew, correct?
yeah,
Yes. And some of the questions are just incredibly hilarious.
yeah,
Um, and some of them are actually really eye-opening to the innocence of everything and how important it is to have these very educated conversations early on, like you said, to guide them into an appreciation for
yeah.
learning. And so I would love to hear what are your best questions
Oh,
that you've had
wow.
from kids, and how what was your reaction, what was the experience? I mean, teaching kids about comprehensive sexual education sounds like such a riot.
Yeah. It is. It is. Gosh, it's very hard for me to pinpoint my favorite best questions. Every single class I teach, I get favorite questions, right? There's an endless stream of curiosity coming from young children. The innocence is amazing, right? And it's our job to make sure that they're safe. So let's start with like the most recent class, right? So yesterday I taught a class on gender-based violence, right? Talking about gender-based violence to a bunch of kids who go to Japanese school, okay, in Japan, which is a very sexist society. and there's heaps of
Mhm.
gender inequality in Japan, right? So these are normalized to them, right? So earlier on in our course, I had introduced incidences of gender inequality, and the kids were shocked, right? So yesterday, we had to talk about gender-based violence, and I realized, hey, actually, when we talk about gender-based violence, so much of gender-based violence is going like, pay attention to the numbers. Look at this. 1 out of 3 women has been sexually assaulted in
Mhm.
her lifetime. Can you imagine telling an 8-year-old that? They're like, what is this to me, right?
They would
So
start yawning immediately.
exactly, exactly. So you got to trick them a little bit, right? You got to get them in the zone. So I started the class with a game of bingo. So we played bingo, and I was like, pay attention to the numbers, pay attention to the numbers, and then stop. Now someone's gone bingo. Let's pay attention to some other numbers, then we'll play another round of bingo. And because they've been in the zone of paying attention to numbers, they were like, what? 1 in 3? What? 38%?
Oh,
What?
wow, that's such a creative approach.
Yeah, I know. I'm really good at what I do, right? If only more people would sign up. Anyway, that my point is, people are asking questions like, in gender-based violence, kids are asking questions like, I mean, they're only asking questions if you put them in that position when they're able to imagine if they were in that situation, right? So I haven't even touched on children who are affected as the result of domestic violence, but children can work it out because they're so in touch with these daily experiences, right? And they've watched cartoons where there are orphanages and stuff. So that am I gonna go to one of
Oh,
those like
no.
buildings where children just wait until an adult comes and buys them?
Oh my goodness.
I'm like, that's what you think an orphanage is?
You
um,
know, we've all had some crazy ideas when we were kids, for sure.
yeah, it's amazing, right? So then I said the reason I'm telling you this is not because you know it might happen to you or what, but if you see, I hope it doesn't happen to you, right? And I said it could happen to you, and then what will you do? And then kids are saying things like, "I would never be with somebody that wanted to hurt me like that." And I was like,
So easy to say now.
yeah. And I said relationships are complex. And then these 8-year-olds, you can talk to them about like the economic impact on the incidences of domestic violence by explaining, look, it's COVID now, people losing their jobs, right? Because companies are shutting. Yeah, the local bakery just shut. These people got laid off. And kids like, yeah, like, can you imagine if like, someone was earning money to feed their family of 3, and then they stopped having money, and they'd be like really stressed out because society is expecting this person to bring in the money, and they feel really embarrassed that they're not. But what about the moms? Aren't they working? They're like, in a lot of societies, moms are expected to stay at home and just look after children. Oh no, but the moms can help. Like, so
Hmm.
they learn. I don't really teach them anything. I just tell them what's happening, and they figure stuff
Mhm.
out on their own. So I think that teaching sex ed is more like guiding sex ed rather than teaching. I mean, later
Mhm.
on, a lot of it's teaching, but a lot of it's guiding.
So, so tell us more about your classes. I know we've talked about it a little bit, but you have a really great website.
Thanks. Let's see. So we've got a new website. We tried to make it such that we've really cut through a lot of the stuff. So if you're the purpose of the website is really, if you look at sex ed online and you learn about sex ed and you go like, oh, kids need sex ed, the unanswered question is, well, where do we get it? And I recently did an interview where I talked about like, if you don't get sex ed, you can't sit around and whine about it. Okay, you got to find a solution. I'm not
Mhm.
saying you have to pay each time. That's why we put out free resources on our social media, right? But if you wanted to, there is an option for you as well. So we cater to that option. And the website is now catering to that option by allowing people to sign up for my classes. So I've got different age groups and an option for them to contact me if they want private lessons or if schools want programs tailored. So I think that it's important to create um, that solution as well, not just going like, okay, I'm creating this content online, make of it what you will. What we know from the research is that sex ed that works is sex ed that's regular. sex ed that gives kids a chance to talk about what they want to talk about. And as I mentioned earlier, people are sort of reluctant to engage with online material sometimes. You don't want to be seen to be
Mm-hmm.
engaging with these contents. So with the online classes, what we've created is really evidence based because I've combined everything I know about what works in sex ed to create this solution. So I offer these 16-week courses that are conducted entirely online. So anyone anywhere in the world can join. Okay. And what's beautiful about that is that they tick all the boxes. They create this anonymous zone. So kids that don't want to show their faces don't have to. Kids that don't want to speak up don't have to. They can chat. They can ask questions anonymously, and they're
Mm-hmm.
learning from the comfort of their own bedrooms, or their own, spaces. They don't have someone judging them. Yeah, it really checks all the boxes, and the regularity and the depth of content that we go into will surprise you. So people are often surprised at what kind of content we cover. So even the parents of the children that are currently in my class, they're like, oh, first of all, it's great that we've been able to outsource this, and second of all, it's great that June keeps us up to date. I always write emails to parents. We're going to cover
Mm-hmm.
this because it's my job. We're going to cover this topic. Is there something I should know about? Is there someone in the class who might be affected by this content? Blah 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 blah.
Oh, that's excellent.
Yeah, of course, it's our job. Like especially gender-based violence. Some of these kids might have seen domestic violence. Like how would they feel
Mm-hmm.
if someone just asked them, "What would you do if you were in this hypothetical situation?" Some kids might be like, "That is real. That happens every
That has
day."
happened.
Yeah.
Yes. It fills that niche. I think there is, as we, study these issues more, we know that,
Hmm.
a lot of parents don't feel comfortable having those conversations.
No.
I think it's incredibly awesome that you provide, these classes.
Yeah, and guess
And
what? Kids don't want to talk to their parents about it either.
I know, I remember being a child, the last
Yeah,
person, as a teenager, the last person I would ever ask was my parents because how awkward.
yeah, yeah. It's
Yes, so I think it's pretty great that you have these classes.
Yeah, thanks. I just wish more people, would sign up for them. I'm learning as I go along. I'm not an expert marketer or whatever, but I'm learning as I go along, and I want the classes to reach more people, you know.
So, June, if I wanted to sign up for your classes or give
Hmm.
the gift of a sex ed class to somebody I love,
Yeah.
how would I do that?
Oh my gosh, it's so easy. All you have to do is go on my website, www.goodsexed.info. Um, and there's a form there. You just fill in like your name or the kid's name and your email address, phone number, blah, 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 and whatever particular requirements that you have. Like some people, they tell me that their kids have a particular condition or blah, blah, And then I will get back to you with more information on intakes and stuff. That's it. So if you wanted to
That
give the
sounds pretty
gift of
easy.
sex ed, yeah, it's super easy. So you sign someone up and then you get all the payment options. And I've tried to price the classes affordably. I want to talk about like pricing. I think, what people need to know is that um, it's hard to I run like a free sex ed content on social media that people can use, right? And it costs money to create this content. It's not as simple as just someone looking into the camera and saying a few things. Often it takes a village to run this content and to put information
Hmm.
out there. And we're very lucky to have received this grant which enables us to do that right now. But for the longest time, this is all self-funded. So the work that I do that is paid, I channel a portion of that into making free stuff to put online. So I
Hmm.
think that if you support the paid work that I do, you also support the free work that I put out. You see, so it's the gift that keeps on giving. My goal is that more and more people get access to this, and talk to me if you have ideas to reach a wider audience. I invite people to look at my work and critique it. Okay, so if you look at work that's been funded, there's dodgy funders galore. Okay, funders that get involved with the kind of content that goes out. So you end up with a lot of organizations that are funded that create content that's abstinence based. Even you'd be
Hmm.
surprised, even people that are funded by organizations that are anti abstinence, okay? um, that are pro comprehensive sex education. They fund organizations locally that end up putting out these sex negative messages. And the science tells us that this is extremely dangerous for young people, right? So I don't do that. I refuse to be part of this. Okay. So I'm not going to be part of a movement that, you know, reduces young people's sexuality to what the government thinks is appropriate. So I think
Hmm.
that I've created a zone where people can really grow. And so I want people to know that, to know what exactly it is that I'm doing and why it's worthwhile, being part of this support community. You got to be the change you want to see, right? So
Yes.
I'm asking children to speak candidly, to learn to speak openly. So what business do I have like couching my work in like professional terms that nobody understands, or being all like serious, and so I'll be taken seriously. I have never tried to not be funny so that people take me seriously, right? Like
Hmm.
I've always started on a comedy footing, and guess what? People still take me seriously. And so I don't
Yeah,
think that's,
absolutely.
yeah,
I think, like you said, the more we learn about what people are engaging with, the more we see the value in the different, art forms of delivering the message. And I think one of the most popular ones is comedy.
yeah.
And as somebody who's watched thoroughly the different things that you put out there, I find it incredibly amusing.
Thanks. I'm confident in what I can do. And I was asked to write this thing recently about my experiences in Japan, and I was thinking about it, like what can I write? And I realized that it being in Japan and doing what I do, it actually really moved me from a state of, you know, being to becoming, you know. This is not some plug for Michelle Obama's book or what, right? But moving from being to becoming is shifting us from just existing, to being something more significant, to giving meaning to our
Mhm.
lives, and we can only give meaning to our lives if we immerse ourselves in our craft, and share that with others. Um, I feel that doing what I do really gives my life meaning, and I'm obsessed with it. And I don't see myself doing anything else until I die. Really, what what else can I do? I don't know. So I think I struggle with that. I struggle with really communicating that passion to other people on a regular basis without scaring them. And someone in Japan said, I've never met anyone who was so obsessed with one idea, one ideal. I said, yeah, I am. And I hope that I hope that there's some change in the future.
So, uh, kind of changing it up, but kind of continuing it. We talked about, what is this ideal? And you mentioned, the safe space and things. And I would love to know, just in general, what is your ideal world for family planning, for reproductive health, for,
Wow.
everything? If you had to envision it 5, 10 years from now, what does that look like?
Wow, that's such an excellent question. It's an excellent podcast host. Um, I mean, like I said, that when we talk about the future, I say it's the now, because first of all, you have the now where kids are having these conversations in certain spaces, and we want them to have more of these conversations. Okay, and then you have certain countries where sexual health services are available, but perhaps people are not accessing them as much, or they still feel shame to go to
Mhm.
these services. Okay, then you have countries like Malaysia where you have an absence of comprehensive sex ed and an absence of access to sexual health services, right? So my ideal future is where all of these forces combine and they're available everywhere. Obviously that it's, parents would not bat an eyelid if you said, um, hey, let's sign our kid up for piano lessons, or when maybe our kid needs to go for extra classes because he's a bit weak with math, because that became the norm. So my dream really is for sex ed to become the norm, that it's no longer something that parents go, oh, I wish the school would provide this, or I wish the government would change its policies. I wish my kid would do this. So we know that these services are there. People can access them if they figure out how to go through the system or whatever,
Hmm.
and with things like access to abortion, for example, we know that with increased advocacy, we can make a difference. We can change the laws, right? So it's awareness,
Hmm.
and it's. I dream of a place where more people become aware, and um, I have to be honest, I see the shift. Slowly but surely, I see a shift, and I hope in my lifetime I will see I will get closer to that ideal.
That brings me to another question.
Mm.
Have you thought about sharing your knowledge in terms of teaching other people to teach sex ed?
There's two parts here, right? So there's the stuff I do for social media, and then there's the stuff I do in my classes. Um, we're producing a global toolkit soon on our sex ed project that was funded by the Ingenuity Fund. Um, so people will kind of gain insights into what we learned from the process, how they can create their own um, online sex ed materials, in the same sort of evidence informed approach that we took, and also sort of things to look out for when they do so. um,
Mhm.
as for the teaching, this is a real challenge for me, because mainly time, putting together teaching materials to do a training of trainers. I've been asked to do this many, many times. And in the past, I've had people shadowing me, but I must confess that it was very challenging, because they were shadowing and they came with their own preconceptions. Um, it was very difficult to do the training and for people to pass the training. So
Interesting.
yeah, it's very difficult to change people's views and values, and like the tone that we take when we talk to young people is so important.
It
Um,
sounds like it would encompass a lot of unlearning.
Yes, exactly. And so, can you imagine like a process like that? If you say training of trainers, right? Who has the time to do this? Who has the resources to do this for an extended period of time? You know, um, people need to make a living. People don't have the time to invest. You know, people would not want to pay for such a course. I don't know. So I've been giving it some thought, and really, I don't know. I don't know the solution. I'd love to train somebody up. I'd love to train some people up. I'd love to teach
Hmm.
them what I know. Um, I was thinking maybe I should write a book about everything that I know. Um,
That
but
would be great. I
yeah.
would certainly read it. We talk about developing learning organizations and a learning mentality. So there's nothing wrong with continuing to learn the rest of our lives. And I think such book would just pass your learnings on to other people, save them a little time in that learning journey.
Mm,
So I think you should definitely consider it. I think it would be really great. And there's other people among the 120 under 40
mm.
that have actually started publishing books like that would be
Right.
great resources.
Okay, so let me tell you another barrier to this, okay? Let me tell you another barrier. Here we go. You want to learn how to teach comprehensive sex education in conservative societies from June Low. Okay, great. Let's assume my world has, my dream has come to reality, and I'm doing this teaching course, right? If you graduate from the School of June, um, where are you going to work? Okay, so here's the thing, it is incredibly difficult for these people to get employed, right? Because, like, nobody wants to employ me in their organization if they're teaching abstinence only. So they see us as rebels. So I'm also thinking, I'm trying to create an environment where, like, after I train you, I can hire you, you see? So, or we can have organizations that want to hire people like that have the right attitudes to teach the right kind of stuff, you know? Because if they're Malaysians, let's say, they could be global citizens, sure. Like in Canada, of course, you could get a job with a health promotion sector, um, or in America. But in conservative countries, people that truly want to unlearn bad behavior and want to teach comprehensive sex education, such as myself, um, where do they work? That's why I have my own business and my own thing, because if you truly don't want to be part of the problem, and I would consider any organization that is still trying to beat around the bush, and teach abstinence on the sly, to be a part of the problem and not the solution. So
Hmm.
quantity is not everything. They may have these wonderful grants, they may have these wonderful badges, but at the end of the day, if they still think they're going to beat around the bush and not be sex positive, I don't want to know it. I don't care for that. So if I'm going to train some people, I want to sort of see if we can have a sustainable way of training them too. I imagine
Hmm.
that funders need to think about this as well. So you fund a training program and you fund a practical course as well. So people are employed in this time. So we're talking long-term funding here, you see? So by
Hmm.
creating an online course, for example, that they can teach, they can immediately get on board and learn how to teach this course, let's say, right? And imagine funders funding people to join this course so the trainers can practice and get better and better, right? And it can only grow from there, and it
Hmm.
becomes a system that they can continue to fund if people don't want to pay for such courses, you know. I think
Right.
this is realistic. Um, I'm sorry to say, like people always say, oh, training of trainers. In the past, I've been asked to do training of trainers where they try to mess with the content of the training, where they go like, train the trainers to teach abstinence stuff. Your teaching skills applied to abstinence stuff. I'm like, just get out of my face. Get
You're like,
out
that's
of
not
here.
how this works.
No, no. And so this is an interesting conversation, Carolina, like sort of training of trainers. Where do the trained trainers go to train further? Where do they go? I think.
That's a, I think that's a very good question. I mean, we talked about training of trainers so that they could train other people, and then
Mm,
it's just this never-ending loop of training of trainers. And I mean,
mm,
I think ideally, the more people know, the better. I think with this new digital world, there's going to be you know, another round of challenges. There's the digital divide. A lot of people don't have access to the internet, don't have access to these online
yes,
resources.
yes.
And so there will still, I think, for a very long time, be
Mm,
the need for in person education.
mm,
And so I think we just gotta, keep hanging in there. And I'm gonna switch it up one last time,
mm,
last question, because this is a big one because I have been hearing about this a lot,
mm,
particularly from my friends that are sexual educators, especially
mm,
online, that and that there is a problem with censorship, and this
mm.
also goes to kind of build on what we've been talking about.
Yep.
Um, how do you see your work affected by the censorship? What do you hear from your colleagues working in the same space, and
Mm.
and what can we do to help the situation?
Well, it seems like this censorship is not a new topic, you see. Um, what gives me comfort is that even people that are producing totally non-sexual content are being censored too. So the algorithm is totally stupid, and it's completely out of your control, you see. And the organizations like the UN agencies that are backing digital content creators, they are fully aware of censorship, and it's a big topic in these circles, right? And they don't have a solution. All they want to say is like, maybe we could engage with Facebook and tell them that they shouldn't censor so much, da 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 da. But censorship still happening. The result of that is that content creators are self-censoring, which is not ideal either. So it's sort of like being more creative, I guess, in putting out your content. But is that
Mhm.
also self-censorship? I guess, I think I proposed to the UN agencies at our last meeting that if you're going to back digital content creators, especially in Southeast Asia, right, you are in conversation with Google and Facebook and that, right? So I think an endorsement of these particular channels, for example, as unfair as it sounds, right, would be unfair to other content creators. I mean, would at least help them to put their work out there. Now, I don't say this lightly. the UN did a review of different types of sex ed content creators. Okay, and they decided, okay, these guys are all right, these guys are all right, these guys are putting out scientific information, these guys are not, right? I think that this UN way of doing things is too slow, right? So this review needs to happen
Mhm.
constantly. Not the UN as a gatekeeper on its own or like a kind of, the boss of us, but that if the if these invisible gatekeepers like Facebook, Instagram, they start to learn about what kind of content is good content, then they may not censor, right? But it's difficult. It's run by a
Mhm.
community. A community it takes issue with it, and then they report it, and then it gets investigated, right? So everything needs to run together. I don't think there's going to be a straightforward solution to the censorship issue. Our work has been censored so many times, and luckily for us, we haven't had our whole channel shut down. Although we are shadow banned on TikTok, um, you know, what can you do when that happens? Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing.
You just wait it out, right?
Yeah, just wait it out. You're silenced. Um, you can't do anything. It's so depressing. So they just on channels that do support you. Like for example, we haven't had any issues with Instagram, so we continue, and Facebook, so we continue there, and we just have to keep going. Um, and the community that finds it offensive, there's always going to be somebody that finds it offensive
Mhm.
until we change the way that people find things offensive, you know, we're never going to get anywhere with this. I think that we also need to find new ways of hosting content too, of posting and hosting content, so that there isn't so much power vested in these social media companies. And truth be told, I don't have an answer to how we're going to overcome the censorship problem. If I did, I'd probably win a Nobel Prize already. But
That's a huge problem.
yeah, it's a huge problem. No one has an answer, you know. But I think the perseverance is the only thing you can have. Don't be discouraged by censorship, and just keep putting stuff out there. I think that maybe
Mhm.
if they censor you, they shouldn't shadow ban you where you're completely silenced. That's awful. Like if you put out content that is deemed unacceptable for whatever reason, if you want to ban somebody, there might be a period of banning if you must ban them, right? But after that,
Mhm.
they should have a chance to respawn, like in a video game, right? And then, you know, and if they violate it X amount of times, then okay, let's talk about that. But to just shut someone down completely because of one violation is just crazy. Mm. I
Yeah, that sounds like a recurring issue that has been happening a lot, especially amongst advocates for sex positive or pleasure,
Yeah,
things like that.
yeah.
And I think I'm with you that this is going to take, a lot of advocacy, a lot of work, a lot of
Mm,
speaking out.
mm.
But yeah, it is a very big problem, bigger than us, definitely. Like you said, the only solace is that it happens to people who aren't even putting out controversial content.
Yeah,
I think we've touched on so many things, and
yeah.
it's been a really fun conversation, June.
Yeah, really
Um,
inspiring for me too.
Excellent. I just want to kind of give you a minute to say any last minute thoughts to our listeners about pretty much anything you want.
Gosh, I've said so much. I just don't even know. I guess follow us on Instagram while we're still there at goodsex.ed. Check out our resources. Go to my website and buy a course so I can stay alive doing what I do. Goodsexed.info. You gotta. I'm blowing my own horn here. Um,
Yes.
read
And how
about.
about some advice? Some advice to other
Mm,
sex educators out there.
don't back down. Don't
Mhm.
don't give up. It's a really really tough journey. Um, But we remember that we teach young people to be comfortable in their own skin and to believe in themselves. And you should practice what you preach. Don't be swayed by a society that constantly tries to push you down. And if you're tough and you keep at it long enough, they'll start to like you. But I just want to end on one quick note about persistence. Um, it's very, very funny. Cortex, the pad brand.
Mhm.
Yeah, so Cortex recently gave me an award and
Oh,
called me like
congratulations.
Thanks. It's like, oh, one of the top Malaysian women to do sex ed, a pioneer of sex education, an activist of our times. And I was like in this award thing along with like big names in Malaysian society, like,
That's
you know,
exciting.
yeah, I was like, what? And what's interesting is I never forget things. I'm like a real elephant when it comes to these things, okay? So I went back and I never delete an email unless it's spam, okay? So I went back in my email and I found an email from like 2010 or something where I had written to Cortex asking them to support my show or my work.
Wow.
Yeah. And of course, no reply. And back then, Cortex had like sex ed content on their website, which was, of course, abstinence based, like
Hmm.
no mention of other sexualities either, very, very heteronormative back then. And now Cortex is giving me an award for being a sex education activist. So, you never know. And I thought long and hard before accepting it, and I thought, maybe I will. And yeah,
Absolutely.
and I think that people that are doing sex ed, don't give up, just keep going. I haven't succeeded yet either, so just keep going.
I think on many spectrums you have succeeded, and I think you are a success.
Thank you.
Well, they say well-behaved women never make history.
That's
So
right. That's
keep
right.
misbehaving, everyone.
That's right.
Well, it has been so much fun, June. Thank you so much for being our guest.
Thanks,
And I
Carolina.
cannot wait to hear more about this toolkit when it comes out. We'll
Oh,
definitely share that on the
yes.
120 to 40 website.
Yes.
And yeah, congratulations on starting your PhD soon
Thank
and
you.
everything else you got going on.
Thank you. I
Um,
look forward to sharing the results of my future research.
Thank you so much, June, and have a great day.
You too.
You've been listening to Candid Conversations. If you like what you hear, please visit our website, www.120under40.org. This podcast is made possible with support from the Bill and Melinda Gates Institute for Population and Reproductive Health at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health and Bayer. This episode was produced by me, Carolina Samaran, Kelly Wellborn, Owen Ramon, and Owen McCusker at Multimedia Production at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. Music for this episode was provided by pond5.com.